Welcome to money4mzansi, working toward a joy economy for all in South Africa by 2030. This is the third video in a 4-part video series. Please watch the video following after this one as well. So, what we saw in the second video was that there is a well-known recipe for national success. It's the Hamiltonian approach to national development. And what this is just quickly again, government-directed, debt-based money creation must drive development of national productive capacity and not speculation. And the massive infrastructure investment by government using this money, thereby stimulating demand, essentially building the infrastructure people need and thereby getting money to citizens so they can buy stuff. And at the same time, one must also enable national manufacturing development by protecting it with import tariffs and subsidies. And we saw that 2 and 3 are two sides of the same coin. You can't do the one without the other one. And we listed some major constraints on South African economic development. And these were the fact that core infrastructure creation is limited by the rate of personal risk, personal profit, personal property-based creation of productive infrastructure, a rate which is currently basically zero. We saw that government inefficiency and corruption is a great drain on government and national finances, and also destroys confidence, which is almost worse, business and entrepreneur confidence in the future. We also saw that our rate of internal infrastructure development is constrained by our rate of export. So where we ended the second video was that we showed that Asian countries used this Hamiltonian approach of national development, of protecting one's industries and allowing them to become competitive. And what the Asian countries were also able to exploit was the fact that they had cheap manual labor and were able to export to other countries. And we saw that this was extremely successful. Shanghai 1990 and Shanghai 2016. Definitely, this worked. That's for sure. But we ended the video saying we can't do the same. So let's see now why can South Africa not do the same? So the first thing we want to discuss is, in the second video as well, we said that in the US, before the US Civil War, you almost had two countries in the US. The South, the plantation owners, the slave owners, who wanted to have no import tariffs because they wanted to export to Britain. And in the North, you had folks that wanted to create a manufacturing economy and they wanted to institute import tariffs. Now, South Africa is sort of similar to the situation in the US. During the apartheid years, and now to a great extent, but especially during the apartheid years, South Africa really, the white population of South Africa prospered by using the black population as the manual labor to extract raw materials from the earth and through agriculture and export these to international markets. And it was a very similar situation, basically, to the US 200 years ago. To a large extent, slave labor in all but name, used for raw materials extraction. And the white population, yes, they did manufacture certain things in South Africa, but it wasn't so much as part of an enlightened economic development plan for all in South Africa as it was part of a coping mechanism for sanctions and so forth. But yes, what happened then in the US was there was a civil war. And the North decided to institute these import tariffs. And for a period of 50 years, the US benefited from import tariffs, allowing its own manufacturing industry to blossom. A Hamiltonian approach to national development. They did this. What happened in South Africa is, although we attained democratic freedom in South Africa, everyone can now vote. At the same time that this happened, we didn't have a war, thank goodness. Otherwise, we would have destroyed much more in our country. But what unfortunately happened when we had the democratic revolution is South Africa immediately joined the World Trade Organization. So the World Trade Organization is it's basically a lobbying venue for the large economies, the big fish in the big bad lake of world trade, who are using it to try and get rid of import tariffs at other countries. They are trying to control who has import tariffs and who does not have import tariffs. And this is a great pity, because as we saw, most other countries use the Hamiltonian approach to national development, which includes import tariffs and protecting your nascent manufacturing industries. But South Africa joined the World Trade Organization right after becoming a democratic country. So this Hamiltonian approach of investing and supporting a booming local manufacturing industry for domestic consumption as well as export, we couldn't really do it because we were not allowed to properly protect our industries. And we keep having these intellectuals coming around from the World Trade Organization and the IMF and the World Bank everywhere saying, open your borders, everything will be fantastic. It's just funny that each one of them, when they were developing, did exactly the opposite. And now that they are the big fish in the lake, they're going around telling everyone, open your borders, it's the best way to develop. And clearly, we can see globally that developing countries are struggling tremendously to develop a modern economy in their countries, and it's because they're not following a Hamiltonian approach. So because we didn't follow this Hamiltonian approach, the only thing we produced were a few more filthy rich capitalists, and we slightly expanded our middle class. But the vast majority of South Africa are still working at essentially slave labor wages and living pretty desperate lives. Certainly nothing comparable to the middle class, which is still largely white, or the rich. So this is not working. So money4mzansi's plan for South Africa, the first step in money4mzansi's plan for South Africa is, as a country, we must commit to a Hamiltonian approach of national development. It is the same way that all the development countries used to get to where they are today. Not doing this is idiotic, and we have to start doing it absolutely immediately. So is that enough? Is step one enough? Unfortunately not. This world of manual labor is unfortunately rapidly becoming the past. This is what manufacturing assemblies look like today, what factories look like today. And every factory is starting to look more and more like this. Even in China, many more factories are starting to employ robots, and manual labor is starting to decrease. It's still early, but it's happening quickly. And in Europe and America, new plants are opening where they are almost fully automated. So agriculture is getting ever more. It's almost fully automated, and even the last little bits of agriculture are now being automated. So the world does not need much more manual labor. The world is automating. The world is not very interested in much more manual labor. Trucks and cars that are driving themselves are just around the corner. There's a restaurant, a fast food restaurant opening in San Francisco end of 2016, which is completely automated. We are having trials in London and Estonia and various other places around the world where little robots are distributing food. So much of production, manufacturing, distribution is being automated at speed. And even service is being automated. This is Emilia, the world's first so-called digital employee. And this digital virtual persona, this Emilia, is now starting to work, in inverted commas, in call centers in many places around the world. And by 2021, you can bet that in South Africa and all across the world, There will be much fewer call center people for outbound marketing or for services or whatever, because we'll be communicating with artificial intelligences. They may not be as smart as humans, these artificial intelligence, not at all, but they will be certainly smart enough to be able to answer a couple of calls about your bank balance or which product you should be using and why your statement is not arriving, or updating your email address, or whatever the case may be. So the world does not need much more manual labor, nor does it need much more repetitive cognitive labor. Sort of like the people in call centers that tend to, handle similar calls every day about a specific narrow subject like insurance contributions. There's multiple books that have been written about this if you're interested in reading up more about it. And we see that this happened as well a century ago or more in the Industrial Revolution during the 19th century as well. And as we see here in the Economist article, no country is really ready and preparing for what is coming toward us at a rapid pace. In the 19th century, it took the threat of revolution to bring about progressive reforms as industrialization occurred. And today's governments would do well to start making the changes needed before their people get angry. And we can clearly see that our people in South Africa are angry already. So what's the impact of this automation going to be on developed countries? Well, as stated before, they have basically have all their infrastructure already. All the buildings, transport, roads, homes, etc. So they don't need much more infrastructure, and they're automating everything. So fantastic for them. So by about the year 2030, most likely the developed countries will be in a joy economy. This is pretty much certain, actually. The majority of populations will not be involved in the manufacturing of core safety and sustenance products and services. We'll have artificial intelligences and machines and robots and whatever else producing and distributing these goods. So this whole thing of manual labor-fueled export-led growth followed by the Asian tigers, forget it. It's gone. That opportunity is over. The world does not need much more manual labor. No one is interested in using the 8 million, 10 million people that South Africa has available for performing manual labor. No one is interested in South Africa's manual labor at all. So this is a big problem. Let's see why. So let's say that we did take 1 trillion rand and invest it into infrastructure. That would place money in the hands of people that are getting salaries to build this infrastructure. And as we saw before, we would then protect our national local manufacturing industry. So even if we pull ourselves up our own bootstraps, even if we follow a domestic development approach, this automation will still be a problem. So if we invest this trillion rand into infrastructure, we increase our manufacturing capacity, but that is largely automated. And why shouldn't it be automated? Why should we create factories that use manual labor so people can have jobs? That's crazy. We should use technology to produce things for us all as efficiently as possible. Why should we do things in old and archaic ways so that someone can have something to do with their hands so that they can get a house and food? No. What we should do is invest everything we have into developing the best, most modern, automated techniques of manufacturing. The challenge with that, of course, is that increasing manufacturing capacity will then most likely not lead to increasing employment. And the odd flip side of this is we'll still have a large amount of unemployment. And then who would buy the clothes produced by the machines? So this is a difficult situation. So if we invested the trillion rand into infrastructure, that is bootstrapping and boosting the local economy, and then we increase manufacturing with robots and we don't create jobs and no one can buy the stuff, and then they still will not be able to get bank debt funding, and we still will not build homes for our people, and we will be stuck where we are right now. So this is a great challenge that automation is putting before us. And we suspect that this is also why the rich in South Africa are not necessarily investing so much anymore. It might be the case that many of the folks that have money in South Africa, the well-off, the rich, are seeing this problem. That we cannot see which 8 or 10 million jobs we're going to create. It doesn't seem to make sense. And that might be why we've got the 700 and something billion rand sitting in these bank accounts, because people are unsure about where the future is going and where jobs will be coming from. So what we're seeing is that there's a fourth major economic development constraint that South Africa faces. The fact that manual labor-fueled export-led growth is no longer possible. And it's due to what economists are starting to call premature deindustrialization. We can no longer use our manual labor to climb up the development totem pole. We have 10, 15 million people that can do manual labor, and the rest of the world is moving to an automated joy economy, and these economies like South Africa are basically stuck. That brings us to the National Development Plan. What is the situation with that? Well, basically, the National Development Plan is a export manual labor-led plan and then followed by domestic growth. And we can see that these policies, and the National Development Plan, is very friendly towards the World Trade Organization and the IMF and the World Bank and opening up of borders and all so forth. But it's clearly not working. No country that has ever developed has followed the approach proposed by the National Development Plan. And one can clearly see this. Our unemployment is increasing. It's not decreasing. And our forecasts of unemployment being reduced drastically is pie in the sky, using the approach that the National Development Plan proposes. So forget it. The National Development Plan is the goals inside it are lofty. The goals and the ideals are good and true, but other than that, it's largely filled with nonsense that just will never ever work. So that's bad. Is there a way out for South Africa? Yes, there is. It is domestic-driven growth, pulling ourselves up by our own bootstraps. But this requires us in South Africa to change how we create, allocate, and exchange money. We have to make some drastic changes to how the fundamentals of South Africa work. And we'll cover that in the next video, part 4, where we'll delve into the high-level money4mzansi plan for South Africa. Thank you. Money4mzansi, working toward a joy economy for all in South Africa by 2030.